Imagine standing in, like, a massive modern grocery store.
Hmm.
The aisles are endlessly stocked,
Yeah, completely packed.
right? The shelves are practically groaning under the weight of fresh produce from, what, 3 different continents?
Oh, at least.
And yet there's this primitive biological alarm bell deep inside your brain that is quietly whispering that you're about to starve.
It is such a wild contrast when you really stop and think about it.
It really is. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a massive stack of notes, excerpts, and theoretical frameworks from a source known only as the Time Traveler.
Yeah, and our mission today is to figure out if that biological alarm bell is, well, our inescapable destiny, or if the entire concept of scarcity is actually just a modern design flaw.
Exactly. We're exploring what the Time Traveler calls the end of scarcity. It's an idea that could fundamentally rewrite the rules of human existence. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to really grasp the magnitude of what the time traveler is proposing, we can't start by looking at futuristic technology.
We have to start with evolutionary biology,
Yeah,
right?
we do. We have to trace a direct causal line from the physical architecture of our brains to the ways our global economies function today.
Because, I mean, for the vast majority of human history, everyday life was just defined by extreme, unrelenting lack.
Completely.
If you roll the clock back 10,000 years, the vulnerability of the human condition is staggering. There was no buffer.
None at all.
Like a slight shift in weather patterns, a late frost, or a localized drought didn't just mean a temporary economic downturn, it meant your entire community could literally be erased from the map.
Precisely. The margins for error were practically zero. And, well, here is where the neuroscience becomes absolutely critical.
Okay, lay it on me.
The brain's ancient survival circuits, specifically the amygdala, which processes threats, and the cortisol system, which manages our stress response, those were forged in that exact crucible of extreme natural scarcity.
So it's not just like a behavioral habit we picked up. It's a hardwired physiological response to the environment.
It is entirely physiological. When early humans faced a threat to their resources, a surge of cortisol would physically shunt blood away from the prefrontal cortex.
And that's the part of the brain responsible for long-term abstract planning, right?
Exactly. It redirects all that energy to immediate survival mechanisms. Your focus narrows, you become highly reactive.
Wow.
The subconscious mind is essentially programmed to operate as if the next devastating drought is always right around the corner, just waiting to wipe you out.
That makes me think of it like this. It's as if modern human society, you're trying to run an incredibly advanced, high-tech supercomputer, but we're still using an outdated, primitive operating system built for a harsh, prehistoric wilderness.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
Like, the hardware is capable of processing global supply chains and space travel, but the underlying base code is still screaming, "Danger! Hoard the berries!"
That is exactly what is happening. The operating system simply hasn't had the evolutionary time to update to the modern environment. Our brains reward us for hoarding resources, for tribalism, for zero-sum competition, and for extreme risk avoidance. Because, those are the exact traits that kept our ancestors alive through brutal winters.
And if you're listening to this right now, I want you to think about your own reactions during a crisis. Think about the last time the news announced a major disruption, and everyone immediately rushed out to panic, buy toilet paper or gasoline.
We've all seen it happen.
Yeah, that feeling of sudden irrational lack isn't necessarily a personal failing or a moral panic. That is your ancient amygdala hijacking your prefrontal cortex.
Doing exactly the job it was designed to do, just in a completely mismatched modern context.
But because our brains are functionally anchored in that distant past, we experience this profound cognitive dissonance when we encounter the staggering reality of our present production capabilities, right?
Yeah, the time traveler's note suggests that our psychology is blinding us to our own technological reality.
The contrast is definitely jarring. One of the excerpts points out that a few decades ago, sequencing the first human genome was a monumental international effort. It took, what, 13 years?
13 years and cost roughly $3 billion. It was the definition of a scarce, hyper-elite scientific resource.
And today, you can sequence a human genome in a few hours for less than $100.
And that exponential curve, it applies to almost everything. Modern medicine routinely prevents or cures diseases that were once absolute death sentences for millions.
Right.
A single modern farmer, leveraging automated machinery, satellite data, and advanced fertilizers, well, he can produce a yield that would have required the backbreaking labor of an entire ancient city-state.
But I have to stop you there, because there's a glaring contradiction to the premise.
Go ahead.
If humanity has genuinely become this extraordinarily productive, if we have the capacity to sequence DNA for pocket change and grow mountains of food, why does scarcity still dictate the lives of billions of people? Why is there still crushing poverty?
What's fascinating here is the distinction the time traveler makes to answer that exact question. We have to separate natural scarcity from artificial scarcity.
Okay.
They are not the same thing, though we often confuse them.
Let's break down the mechanics of those two concepts.
Sure. Natural scarcity is rooted in the physical limits of the universe. Certain elements, like rare earth metals in the planet's crust, they just exist in finite quantities. You cannot simply will more of them into existence.
Right, but even natural scarcity is a shifting target now, isn't it?
How so?
Well, we used to think arable land was a hard natural limit. But now, with vertical hydroponic farming, we can stack acres of crop production inside a single climate-controlled warehouse in the middle of a desert. We are blurring the line of what is naturally scarce.
We are, which makes the second category, artificial scarcity, even more prominent.
Define that one for us.
Artificial scarcity exists when humanity possesses the technological and material capacity to provide something abundantly, but the systems we have built intentionally restrict access to it.
Wait, that almost sounds like a conspiracy theory. You're saying we actively engineer lack?
It's not a shadow conspiracy, I promise. It's just the mechanical result of our economic and legal systems. Let's look at the digital world.
Okay.
A digital file, an ebook, a piece of software, or a medical research paper can be copied and distributed globally at a marginal cost of absolute zero.
Right, the server has infinite copies.
Exactly. But to maintain the traditional economic model, we build complex digital rights management software, essentially erecting digital toll booths and paywall. The scarcity isn't in the data.
The scarcity is enforced by the toll booth architecture.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, if you are listening to this on your commute right now, look out the window. If you're driving past half-empty commercial office buildings while simultaneously hearing a news report on the radio about a massive local housing crisis, that cognitive dissonance you're feeling,
Yeah.
that is artificial scarcity in action.
That is a prime example.
The physical space exists, but zoning laws, financial incentives, and legal structures prevent it from being utilized to solve the lack of housing.
Exactly. Or look at the De Beers diamond cartel historically stockpiling diamonds in vaults to artificially restrict global supply and keep prices astronomically high.
Yeah, that's wild.
Or, on a much more vital level, look at global agriculture. The world currently produces more than enough total calories to comfortably feed all 8 billion people on the planet.
So if the food physically exists, why is starvation still a reality?
Because the bottleneck is no longer production. The bottleneck is artificial. It's lacking distribution infrastructure, localized political conflict, trade tariffs, and economic barriers.
Right.
The food literally rots in silos because the systems we've built fail to connect the abundance to the human need.
So what does this all mean? If artificial scarcity is essentially a human-made bottleneck, like a design flaw in our social architecture, can human-made technology finally dismantle it? Is that how we reach this age of abundance the time traveler envisions?
The sources outline a very specific convergence of technologies that attack these bottlenecks by fundamentally changing the mechanics of production. They increase output while aggressively reducing the necessary inputs.
Give me an example of how that actually works in practice.
Well, take biotechnology, specifically CRISPR gene editing. By editing the genome of a crop, scientists can create a strain of wheat that is highly resistant to drought and requires a fraction of the nitrogen fertilizer.
Oh, wow. So you are basically decoupling agriculture from the unpredictable weather patterns that used to guarantee natural scarcity?
Exactly. You are drastically lowering the resources required to produce the same or greater amount of food.
That is incredible.
And when you combine that with AI optimizing supply chains, advanced robotics automating manufacturing, and renewable energy bringing the marginal cost of power closer to zero, you begin to systematically dismantle the physical barriers to abundance.
But wait, I have to push back hard on this technological optimism. Doesn't human nature just expand to consume whatever abundance we create?
That's a valid concern.
Economists call it the Jevons paradox, right? Back in the 19th century, when we made steam engines much more efficient, we didn't end up using less coal. We ended up using massively more coal because cheaper energy just meant we built more factories.
Exactly.
If we make everything hyper-efficient and cheap, won't we just consume the planet to death? So what does this all mean for this hypothetical age of abundance?
That is a brilliant counter-argument, and the time traveler's notes directly address the Jevons paradox. Historically, yes, efficiency led to greater consumption of finite resources,
Right?
but the argument here is that the nature of modern technological breakthroughs is fundamentally different because they are shifting us towards circular economies and renewable inputs. Solar energy doesn't deplete the sun the way a steam engine depletes a coal seam.
Ah, so the input itself is no longer a bottleneck.
Correct. However, your pushback highlights the central warning in the text. Technology is just a lever. It creates the potential for abundance, but it does not guarantee it.
So it's about how we use it.
Exactly. A hyper-efficient AI supply chain can be used to feed a continent, or it can be used to hyper-target consumer ads to sell more plastic junk we don't need. The tools make the pie bigger, but our institutions dictate how it gets sliced.
Which means we can't just rely on some magical glide path to utopia. We have to actively manage the deployment of these tools.
We do.
And to change those institutions, we have to address the root of the problem, which is the beliefs of the people running them.
Exactly. And this leads us to the psychological hurdle discussed in the sources, the blank slate theory. This theory challenges the ingrained assumption that greed and scarcity are inherent human traits. It posits a profound truth: no child is born believing in scarcity.
Right. They don't emerge into the world inherently understanding compounding interest or resource hoarding.
You don't. That entire worldview is culturally conditioned. And for thousands of years, our religious, economic, and philosophical frameworks have normalized scarcity. Think of the pervasive cultural narratives that treat poverty like it's a law of physics. Phrases like, the poor will always be with you.
We treat economic suffering like it's gravity. We view it as a permanent, immovable law of nature, rather than what it actually is a consequence of our own systemic design flaws.
And as long as society accepts that scarcity is inevitable, we won't even attempt to engineer systems to eliminate it.
That makes total sense.
The people running our institutions are operating under the assumption that there will always be losers in the economy, so their focus remains on managing the scarcity rather than curing it. Unlearning that culturally conditioned scarcity mindset is the prerequisite to entering an age of abundance.
But unlearning that takes a massive paradigm shift. Because a lot of people hear age of abundance, and their mind immediately jumps to infinite unchecked consumption.
Yeah, that's a common reaction.
They think it means everyone gets 10 yachts and a private jet, which obviously breaks the physical limits of the planet.
That is a critical misunderstanding of the concept. Abundance in this framework is not about infinite luxury. The core objective outlined by the time traveler is the universal baseline guarantee of human necessities.
Okay, so a baseline.
Yes. It is about ensuring that the foundational pillars of civilization, food, shelter, healthcare, and education, are completely decoupled from the threat of deprivation.
It's about raising the floor so high that the concept of starvation or dying from a preventable disease becomes a historical curiosity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, an abundant society still has limits. Certain things will remain immutably scarce. Time, for instance, remains the great equalizer.
That's true.
No matter how advanced our biotechnology becomes or how efficiently our AI runs the economy, you still only get 24 hours in a day.
You can 3D print a house, but you cannot 3D print an extra hour.
Exactly. Attention is another fiercely scarce resource. Human cognitive bandwidth is deeply limited.
Right.
Unique physical experiences, like being physically present to watch a total solar eclipse from the peak of a specific mountain, or holding a one-of-a-kind historical artifact, those remain scarce by definition.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about how we have historically viewed survival. For thousands of years, the human economy has essentially been a brutal, high-stakes game of musical chairs.
That's a great analogy.
There are 10 people in the room, but only 8 chairs. And the entire history of human conflict, politics, and economics has been the anxiety of the music playing. We spend all of our energy fighting over who deserves a chair, building alliances to secure a chair, and justifying why the 2 people left standing deserve to go without.
Because for most of history, the physical reality was that we simply did not have the material to build the last 2 chairs. The anxiety was justified.
Exactly. But shifting into this age of abundance means we have to wake up and realize that the rules of the game have fundamentally changed. Through advanced agriculture, AI, and renewable energy, We finally have the lumber, the tools, and the capability to just build enough chairs for everyone in the room.
We really do.
But because of our amygdala, because of our evolutionary hangover, we're still frantically running in circles, terrified the music is going to stop. We have to realize we don't have to play the game anymore.
We just have to make the collective decision to build the remaining chairs and arrange them so everyone has a seat. It sounds simple, but overcoming our own biological programming is the hardest part of the equation. We judge the possibilities of the future entirely by the limitations of the past.
Which is such a massive failure of imagination. I mean, think about someone living just 200 years ago. If you told them that today we routinely fly across oceans in pressurized metal tubes,
Right.
or that we can remove a failing heart from one person's chest and transplant it into another to save their life, or that we carry glass rectangles in our pockets that can instantly pull up the collected knowledge of the entire human species.
It wouldn't just be impressive to them, it would be incomprehensible. It would be pure, literal magic. But yesterday's impossible magic is today's mundane reality.
Yeah, we complain when our global, instantaneous satellite communication takes an extra 3 seconds to buffer.
We do. We are already living in a world of technological miracles. We just haven't aligned our social systems to distribute those miracles equitably.
So let's trace the journey we've taken today in this deep dive. We started by looking inward, examining how the ancient, cortisol-soaked wiring of our brains was perfectly adapted for a prehistoric world of constant threat, but leaves us perpetually anxious today.
We examine how that evolutionary hangover blinds us, causing us to mistake artificial scarcity, the systemic bottlenecks like digital paywalls, empty office buildings, and unequal distribution for natural, unchangeable limits.
We looked at the mechanisms of how modern technology, from genome sequencing to CRISPR gene editing, can fundamentally rewrite those limits by decoupling production from resource exhaustion.
And we confronted the reality that these tools are useless unless we have the social wisdom to change our institutions, unlearn the cultural myth that poverty is permanent, and finally decide to build enough chairs for everyone.
We are standing on the very threshold of a civilization that can guarantee the foundations of human flourishing: food, shelter, healthcare, and education for every single person.
It is truly a profound realization.
For you listening right now, I want to challenge you as you step back into your week. Look closely at the systems around you.
Yeah, keep an eye out for it.
When you encounter a limitation, a bottleneck, or a lack of resources in your community, don't just accept it at face value. Ask yourself, is this scarce because it physically has to be, or is it scarce because of the architecture of the toll booth we built around it?
Once you learn to spot the difference between natural limits and artificial barriers, it fundamentally rewrites how you view global news, economic policies, and human potential.
It really does. And that brings us to the ultimate profound question posed by the time traveler's notes. If survival is no longer the primary consuming challenge of the human species, what actually becomes the purpose of our lives?
It forces a total redefinition of identity. If we aren't spending our fleeting time on Earth just struggling to exist, what do we spend our lives becoming?
And building on that, I want to leave you with one final, slightly unnerving thought to mull over on your own. If we truly conquer material scarcity, if the game of musical chairs is finally over and everyone's basic survival is guaranteed, the sources tell us that the only things left that are genuinely scarce are our attention and our unique experiences.
Right.
If that is true, what happens to human ambition? Will our future societies inevitably create extreme new hierarchies based purely on who can capture and control our focus? In a world where everyone has enough to survive, does attention become the only currency that matters?
That is a staggering implication for the future of our culture.
Thank you so much for joining us and exploring this profound paradigm shift. We will leave you to sit with that thought until next time.